Hi, I'm Ollie, and in this Pods Explained video, I'm going to be making some predictions for the questions that could come up in the first Edexcel A-Level Politics exam in around 6 weeks' time. But before that, I wanted to let you know that in just a week's time, I'm going to be running a 5-hour-long revision webinar for the UK Politics section of the first Edexcel A-Level Politics exam. It will be focused on preparing you really well for the questions that are most likely to come up in this year's exam. And make sure to go to the Pods Explain website to sign up. A week later, a week and a day later, we're doing one on core political ideas as well. So make sure to sign up for that one as well if you're interested. And also go to the Pods Explain website if you're looking for loads of other resources to help you in your politics A-level, including essay plans, detailed, updated textbooks, and a place to sign up for tutoring if that's something you'd be interested in. Without further ado, let's get into it. The most important thing to say, the most important part of this video is a really important disclaimer, and that's that you shouldn't only revise the topics that I'm going to go through the predictions for. You should make sure to revise everything on the specification. Anything on the specification could come up in the exam, including topics that were asked about last year, and that was shown really clearly last year by the fact that referendum is a relatively small topic in terms of electoral systems, where there's a lot more questions that could get asked rather than just on referendums, came up 2 years in a row. And that shows that the exam board are very willing to catch people out who are trying to play the game and just revise certain topics that have been predicted by people like myself or your teachers. So the predictions in this video are effectively only educated guesses about what's more or less likely to come up based on the topics that students have been examined on in recent years. You'll definitely not be well prepared for the exam if you only revise these topics. You should definitely revise everything. For me, this disclaimer is more important this year than in any previous year, and that's for two main reasons. Firstly, because a lot of the topics that were asked on last year in the UK politics section of the exam, so the source question and the 230 mark essay questions, were on relatively big topics, including pressure groups, main party policies, and voting behaviour. And that's just because they came up last year, because they're such massive topics, I think it makes it less likely that they won't be asked this year. So they definitely could come up again. And secondly, on the political ideas section of this exam, in the last couple of years, the topics have been relatively easy to predict. They followed quite a clear pattern. And I think the thing with referendums last year demonstrated that they're willing to catch people out and to ask questions on the same topic 2 years in a row. At some point, they're going to do that on political ideas, whether by asking 2 questions on the same political idea, so 2 on socialism, for example, or 2 on conservatism, or by not following that pattern of the one that wasn't asked last year definitely being asked this year. So be really careful this year with how you use these predictions. That being said, let's get into them. So a few topics that are less likely to come up this year due to coming up last year are referendums. That's come up 2 years in a row now. I'd be very surprised if it came up again, but of course they could do it. They demonstrated last year that they're willing to ask topics a number of years in a row and catch people out. Think tanks, lobbyists and corporations, there was a question, an essay question on those last year. Even though pressure groups was also included in this question, I think it's much more likely than the others that pressure groups would get asked about. Again, this is a bit of a bigger part of the specification. There's more questions you can get asked about it. But I think think tanks, lobbyists and corporations are relatively unlikely to come up. Of course, that doesn't mean they couldn't come up. And election campaigns and manifestos, exactly the same. Could be asked again, or you could bring them in as part of a more general question on voting behaviour. I think voting behaviour could easily come up again, but I think it's very unlikely that the question will be focused specifically on election campaigns and manifestos. As I mentioned, quite a few of the questions last year were on big topics that could very easily be asked about again this year, so don't be complacent. There's a reason I haven't put Labour Party, Conservative Party and Liberal Democratic Party policy in here in the questions that are less likely to come up this year, even though there was a question on them last year. It's because, particularly for the Labour and Conservative parties, they're big topics, the policies of these two main parties, which hadn't been asked before last year. And I think they could easily be asked again this year because they're such important questions in UK politics. For me, everything else is as likely as anything else to come up. As I mentioned, you have to revise the whole specification, but there are a few topics that I have a hunch are more likely than others to come up, and that's the media, rights in context. So these were both predicted last year as well, but didn't come up. So for me, that makes them even more likely to come up this year. In terms of the electoral systems question, there's likely to be one because there's normally one from each of the bigger 4 topics. I think it's likely to be comparing first past the post with another electoral system in use in the UK, particularly one of the proportional systems. So that's going to be the ones in use in Scotland, the additional member system, and the one in use in Northern Ireland, the single transferable vote system. Or it could be on electoral system analysis, which is a similar question effectively, but it will be less of a general one, such as evaluate the view that first past the post is more effective than any other electoral system in use in the UK, and will be more something like looking at the impact of pressure groups of electoral systems, in the UK. So evaluate the view that different electoral systems in use in the UK have differing impacts on party representation or voter choice, for example. So very much it's the same content, comparing the different electoral systems in use in the UK, but so it's effectively 3.1 is the first one, and 3.3 in terms of specification is the last one. I think referendum is less likely to come up this year, as I mentioned. In terms of the political parties topic, because the Labour and Conservative parties came up last year and the Lib Dems as well, I think it's more likely that we'll get a question this year on the party system or the importance of minor parties or factors that affect party success. Again, I haven't included party funding in there this year because it was asked 2 years ago. It's a relatively narrow topic, so I think it could definitely come up. But I think these ones are the most likely, and I think it's such a topical question after the 2024 election about whether we have a multi-party system now, about the importance of minor parties, particularly with Reform now overtaking the 2 main parties in some polls and looking very likely to do way better in the next election and potentially challenge for government. It's such a topical question. It would be such an interesting question, and I think they could definitely ask it. And the final 2 ones I think haven't come up in a long time and are quite likely to come up are debates over suffrage, which has effectively never come up. So, for example, it could be a question, evaluate the view that reforms to the franchise in the UK haven't gone far enough. And then direct and representative democracy. So you get asked a question on the health of representative democracy in the UK. So evaluate the view that representative democracy is ineffective in the UK, or one comparing direct and representative democracy, for example. I just realised I didn't go through the specific questions for those 4 topics that like give you examples of questions that come up. So for the media, I think it could easily be a question on the importance of the media. So evaluate the view that the media has little influence in UK politics, for example, or it could relate it potentially to democracy. Evaluate the view that media is harmful to democracy. The media is harmful to democracy in the UK, or you could also get a question potentially comparing different types of the media and their importance, particularly, for example, the importance of social media in comparison to traditional forms of media such as newspapers and TV, and potentially opinion polls as well. Rights in context, the key kind of focus of any question would likely be how effectively rights are well protected in the UK. You could get a division between individual and collective rights in that question. That's the main kind of type of question you get asked. Again, I think it's a really topical question, particularly with some of the measures that the previous Conservative government and now the new Labour government have made in relation to rights, the rights of refugees in the country, for example. For more detail on that, have a look at the example pack on the Politics Explained website, and also a video I'm going to be bringing out in a few days on 7 key UK policy examples to use in your exam. On comparing first past post electoral system, I had a look at those, and on the party system you could get something like evaluate the view that there's a multi-party system in use in the UK rather than a 2-party system, or evaluate the view that minor parties now play a major role in UK politics, something like that, the importance of minor parties and the factors that affect party success. Could be something like evaluate the view that leadership is the most important factor in party success. Moving on now to the core political ideas predictions for this year's exams. For me, the likelihood for each core political ideology come up this year is first socialism, so it wasn't asked about last year, then conservatism was asked about last year, but not the year before, and then finally liberalism, which was asked about in 2023 and 2024. This being said, I think this is especially important this year. The predictions have been quite simple the last couple of years and have been right in relation to the core political ideologies. That's going to change at some point, and I think it could definitely change this year. So I certainly wouldn't revise just socialism and conservatism, because I think it's probably more likely than not that it won't be socialism and conservatism. I think it will probably be socialism, but it could easily be liberalism as well. But they could be really quite annoying and ask 2 questions on one ideology, for example, socialism or conservatism, or ask a question on liberalism and conservatism again to try and catch people out. So I think I always say revise all 3 core political ideas. I think that's especially true this year more than others. As you can see down here, I've made 2 mock paper, 1 exams to help you practice. If you click the first link in the description, it will take you to the blog posts that I've been going through, and you'll be able to click the link on those to help you practice the exams. They include questions from these predictions. So these topics that are most likely to come up, those questions are in there. And you can effectively make it into 4 mock exams if you want, because there's a choice of 2 questions, 2 sources, 2 essay questions, and 2 ideologies questions, as you'll get in the final exam as well. As I mentioned at the start, please sign up for the revision webinar on the website that we're running next week, and also the following week on core political ideas. If you're looking for a really useful revision session, really lengthy revision session to help prepare you for that first exam, please let me know if you've got any comments or questions in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next video. I will be doing future videos on the channel on paper 2 and paper 3 as well.